took our friendship to a whole new level.
It did.
And we just met
It did. We
officially
just met
today.
No, we've known each other.
We've known.
Dan had this called from day one. Dan
You
Yaku
have
said
an incredible tan.
Wasn't he great?
Okay. You're good.
Yeah.
Oh man. Praise God, we need more of that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here we go.
Bring them on.
All right.
Sex Nation, Brent and Kellee, take one.
Where do you want to go? All right, let's start with, and again, you're speaking to Rebecca. Are we good then? Yep. Focus good, the light focus. Are we at 45? Okay. Let's start with just in general, how you guys met.
Go ahead.
Well, our story of how we met is pretty funny, pretty late in life, actually. I grew up in Pennsylvania, 2 hours from where she grew up, and went to college at Liberty University. And when we were at Liberty, I didn't know her for a couple years, and then when I was a junior at Liberty, we had a group of mutual friends, hung out a bunch together, and I started to develop feelings for Kellee. And so I asked her out on a date, and she said no. She had just gotten over a pretty long, hard relationship, and so she said no to me because she wasn't ready to get into a relationship. I had never had a girlfriend before. I had never been in a relationship, so I took it kind of hard, but we were still friends. And so I asked her out again a few months later, and she said no again. And she said she really wasn't ready again. So I continued to pursue her. I continued to get to know her more over the summers. Came to visit her, and then it was the third time was the charm. I asked Kellee one more time out, and she said yes. We went to a drive-in movie theater, actually, on a date. And ever since then, it's been 13 years ago. Well, we've been married for 13 years. That was 15 years ago that we actually started to go out. But that's my take on our first one. So.
Real quick, Kellee, before you start, where's your mic? Is your hair covered? Oh,
It's right here.
Okay, we're good on here. Okay, you can pull your hair back now.
Okay. No, it's okay.
I'd like it in the front, yeah. Okay, Kellee, just pick up there if there's anything you want to add to that.
Yeah, so the first, really, when I started developing our feelings for Brent was we were taking a road trip home together, and we both were, since we're from Pennsylvania, decided to travel together. I would drop him off, and we're supposed to go with a bunch of friends. All the friends bailed, and Brent was a lot quieter than I was, and so I was asking myself, how am I going to ride in the car for 6 hours with a guy that doesn't talk? So naturally, I talked the entire time. And I realized that when everybody else was out of the car, he actually started talking. And I got to know about him, about his life and his backstory and how he was raised. And then at that point, I was like, wow, this guy's not too bad. And my mom did mention about, hey, why don't you date Brent? And I was like, no, he's not my type. But I really got to know that he was my type when we went on this road trip together. And then when we came back to Liberty, a 6-hour drive back home, we hung out kind of frequently then, ever since that. So, yeah.
Brent, your background, Kellee, same question for you. Just give me a little bit of an overview of background. Father's present, not present, some challenges that's highlighted for you, maybe in your background that you think had a coffee machine there. Had an impact, something that you feel like had an impact on you.
Hold real quick while Jamie
Just unplug it.
You go first.
Okay, thank you. Here we go.
Ready?
Is Brent going first, or did you save me?
Either.
Oh, okay. So I grew up with mom and dad present in the home. I had an older brother. Grew up in the church. We Christian family. Mom and dad loved the Lord. Went to a Christian school. Then I went to public school as I got older. But mom and dad definitely present in the home. Conservative background, conservative values. A really great family upbringing.
Yeah, and I was raised very similarly. Mom and dad in the home. I have two brothers, one older, one younger. I'm a middle child, and was raised in a Christian home. My parents were really good people, served a lot, they really passed that on to me to serve in both community and church. But it was it was quiet. I grew up in a very quiet household, and that was something that Kelly mentioned. I was really quiet on that road trip, but then opened up, and we never talked about hard topics. We never discussed really important issues. It was very just surface level relationships, sit down at dinner, and we didn't really talk about much about the day and things like that. So I never had any hard conversations with my parents, and I think that's something that I want to do differently. Is I want to be able to have those hard conversations with people and with my family, with our children. So that's something that stands out to me, is just how quiet our household was.
On that train, give me a little dynamic, no names or ages, but just how many kids you have. And then I want to go straight into the meat of this. Okay, so just give me a second. Maybe Kelly, just talk about the kiddos as a family, what your family dynamic is.
Yeah, we have 3 children, 8-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 3-year-old. Very busy, very crazy lifestyle. 2 of our oldest are in school, and the little one's at home with me. Yeah.
Tammy, can you step in and just give Brent that napkin? No?
I did. As soon as we started, it was like boom. It just hit me like
It's the adrenaline.
100.
It's the adrenaline. His nose, the T, his forehead, nose, and then his temples. Okay. Where I want to
You're
go
gonna be
with
busy.
this is I want to go with this, Kelly, into this is where my mind was on my marriage. The rhythm I thought we had. And then the moment where it was either shared, uncovered, experienced, where, okay, wait a minute, there's this other element. So set it up for me on kind of where your mind frame was, as if to talk to somebody who, just went through this to go, I know this is what you think, and now you come to this realization.
So, very shortly after we got married, I knew something was wrong. Call it intuition, the Holy Spirit. Something wasn't right. Everything that I felt my marriage was supposed to be, there was definitely something missing. I went to Brent and kind of said, what's going on? I don't feel connected to you. There's something missing. I thought we were supposed to be connected and be one, but we're not, and something's wrong. So we went a couple times over some things and really couldn't figure out what was going on. The truth did come out that he was struggling with pornography probably about 2 months into our marriage, and I was devastated. I didn't understand, as being a woman, I didn't understand pornography. I didn't understand that draw, because I'm made female. We don't have that same thing. So I was alone. I felt embarrassed because here we were, this Christian couple, Christian involved in the church, and we had some major issues. I had no one to talk to, nor did I really want to talk to anybody, because I was embarrassed that people would look at my husband different. They would look at me different. They would question, why are you still with him? Or would they say, why are you making a big deal about something? It's not that big of a deal. He didn't cheat on you. So I definitely felt something was wrong, and I felt it enough that I knew that the Holy Spirit was saying, we need to figure this out. I want to have a whole marriage. I want to have a happy marriage, and I want to feel connected to my husband. And when we found out there was a pornography issue, immediately I knew that was what was keeping us back from a healthy whole marriage.
Brent, on that line, had you discussed prior to the marriage, obviously not with Kellee, but was it a discussion or was it a private matter, more in secret?
There was several discussions that I had about pornography with other men, with accountability partners, with other people.
Can we start that again, just because you coughed as soon as you started speaking? You had several conversations, thank you.
I had several conversations with other men, other friends, accountability leaders, and the thing that was missing was honesty. And my pornography addiction went long before we had met, and it was kind of in the middle. For 10 years I had battled with pornography, and I had had conversations with pastors, some who took it very seriously, some who did not take it seriously, had conversations with friends, and most of those didn't know really how to help in that area. So I never had a conversation with my father about it. When it was discovered that I was using pornography when I was still at home, my mom was the one that had a conversation with me about it, but she didn't really understand it either. So I had discussions, but honesty was never at the forefront. I would tell half-truths. I was not honest 100% with Kellee either, even when all this had come out, and she got that gut feel that something was off, and so she kept asking, and I praise the Lord because it was obviously Him nudging her to say there's more information here. But until you learn to be honest, until I learned to be honest, there's no healing. You will not be 100% whole, you will not be 100% healed, and you will not be able to overcome the addiction because you're not real about what it is and what it's become in your life. It's more than just a bad habit. It was something that had completely controlled my mind and controlled my thought life, my actions of the day, how I planned my day out. So I did have discussions with people, and unfortunately, in the beginning especially, they were very not authentic. They weren't real because I wasn't 100% honest with people.
But I'm going to stay on that train. Can you talk to me about the headspace? Let's go back to when you started 10 years prior, and walk me through how all-consuming does this become? Where did it start, and how much of your life does this take over? And if so, what's your mind, the headspace, kind of get into some of that, the mental side of it?
What this did to my mind and how it controlled my thoughts is something I didn't really discover until I was free from it. And I didn't have the perspective, I didn't have the clarity. But back, the way it all started for me was I was abused when I was a young child, sexually abused by an older sibling. And that created a curiosity, it created questions in my mind, it created all kinds of things. And so then it kind of led from there to back in our house growing up, we didn't have internet and things like that, so it would be, my mom's Sears catalog and looking at that, and then it became to when we finally did get internet, it was dial-up internet and it was slow, but where it really sped up, I think, is when I went to college, and then I had access to anything I wanted to. But what it did in my head is when I would look at somebody, when I would look at a woman, I didn't see her as a woman, I didn't see her as a child of God, I saw her as an object. And unfortunately, what had happened is I had seen so many images, I had seen so many things in my head that there's just a library of that information that's in my head, that at that time I could just pull up anything at any time kind of in my head. And so when I would see people, I didn't see them as who they were as a person. I saw them as an object. I saw as what could I get from them. And how it controlled me was, I remember I would go to the public library to do schoolwork when it was over summer. I was taking classes, and I'd go to the public library, and instead of I'd do some homework, I'd do some work for my classes, and then it would just consume my mind. It would be like I have to see an image, I have to see something, and that went on for that summer. And always wanted to stop. So in my head, because of how I was raised, I knew it was wrong. And in my head, I had this battle of, I don't want to do this anymore, but I don't want to be real about it. So I never got freedom from it. And that was a battle for, honestly, the whole 10 years. It was a battle. And every time I had that battle in my own head, I would lose every time. If I didn't call on help from God, if I didn't call somebody, if I didn't speak it openly, if I just in my thoughts tried to battle with it back and forth, I lost every single time. And that was very discouraging. It was very shameful. And one thing it did to my mindset was I lied to myself, and I believed those lies that I'm not hurting anybody. I'm the only one doing this. No one's going to, you're not going to be able to help people because you have this thorn in your side that you're not. So I was very quiet. I was very reserved. I wasn't open. God wasn't able to use me because of what I had allowed my mind to be. It just consumes you, and you need more and more and more. And it's not like it goes backwards. It's not like then you say, okay, I don't want to do this anymore, and then you backtrack past the Sears catalogs to nothing again. At this point, you've wired your brain to look for more and more and more, and more hardcore and more hardcore, and unfortunately, it leads down the path of destruction, and you are hurting. I was hurting people. Even though I wasn't in a relationship with Kelly, I was creating a person, I was creating a mindset that wasn't healthy for marriage, wasn't healthy for relationship, wasn't healthy as a friend. And so I wasn't preparing myself and being the person that God designed me to be. I was following my own self it's a very selfish act. Pornography is a selfish act on all fronts. On my part as a user, on the part of producing it, it's all selfish for one's own personal gain. It's not for anybody else.
Kelly, when this world opened up to you, because pornography wasn't in your life before this, even as a concept, right? You talked a little bit about the hurt, but can you just talk a little bit about some of the questions you went through as it relates to relationship and marriage? And then after that, can you move into what have you learned about pornography since?
Yeah, so pornography in my marriage, I'm sorry, can you repeat the first part of the question?
First part is, it wasn't in your world, and then it came in, so it brought up questions in your marriage, like, did it make you insecure? How did it affect you? Your worth, your marriage? Does it touch on your own image, identity? You know, because it wasn't in your world. What's that? We can break it into two parts. What was that like?
When I first found out that Brent was looking at pornography, I was immediately very self-conscious. Obviously, the people and the images in pornography are beautiful people. You can't compete. The average person can't compete. So I felt very self-conscious. I questioned myself. I questioned, do you really love me if you're looking at that? You know, we're married and you're married to me. You can have sex with me. And why are you looking at these pictures of other women? I questioned, am I not good enough? Am I not pretty enough? Am I not what you've wanted? And those are a lot of the hurt and the feelings that I felt when Brent was looking at these things. I definitely learned, though, that through pornography, it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with how God made me or how beautiful He made me or anybody else. But it has to do with sin, and it has to do with a selfishness that I often tell people it's like an addict. If you have an alcoholic and you offer them a cigarette, it's not going to quench that drink.
Can you say that sentence again? It's like
Hold
an
on,
addict.
Sure.
hold on.
Sorry about his savage.
That's okay.
You often tell people it's like
Yeah. I often tell people pornography is like a certain type of addict. I compare it to alcohol and smoking. If you're an alcoholic and you give somebody a cigarette, it's not going to quench that thirst. And so understanding that pornography is a different type of thirst than having marital sex that God created for husband and wife. It's completely different. Porn is selfish. Sex in marriage is good. It's God designed. It was designed to be good. And it wasn't until years down the road that I dealt with my own insecurities of that I understood that. And I understood that it has nothing to do with me or not a reflection on me, but of sin and the pornography addiction.
Kellee, in that moment, obviously in that moment you stayed. Talk to us a little bit, both of you, about the challenging time that was as in the rank when it finally came out. Question for you that you can ponder is when it finally came out, was there any sense of freedom, like, okay, well, now the secret's out? But also, what kind of trials did that produce in your marriage? And then for you, Kellee, the process of learning, you stayed. Like, why did you stay? What was that process like?
Sure. So when I first found out, we finally hit rock bottom when I was grilling Brent, there's something wrong, please tell me, something is not right. And I looked at Brent and he crumbled to his knees, his hands were in his face and he was sobbing on the floor. And at that point, my stomach wrenched, dropped to the floor because I'm like, what are you about to tell me next? I knew there was more. So he, at that point, disclosed his abuse as a child, which he had never told anybody before. He disclosed his pornography struggle for 10 years. And of course, I'm angry because why did you wait this long to tell me? I felt betrayed. I felt tricked. You didn't give me a choice. And so going into, I started off angry. And then I got to the point where I had my aha moment. I was trying so hard to change Brent, to fix Brent, and I realized that I couldn't fix Brent. Jesus was the only one that could fix Brent. And a friend of mine sent me for Christmas, it came a couple days before New Year's, a devotional and a box of Godiva chocolates. And I remember opening up to that day of the devotional and eating my chocolates, and it basically said that the path you're on is lonely, but God has a plan for you, and He has a plan. So at that moment, was I angry at my husband? Absolutely. Was I hurt? Absolutely. But I knew that I had to put everything I could into my marriage. I had to do my best to do everything I could, and God had called me to do, even despite of the hurt, because I knew that if my marriage survived, that I'd be able to share and be able to help other people. So through that anger and through that hurt, I just really clung to Jesus and knew that He is the only one that's going to get us through this, and I just prayed that the Holy Spirit would fix Brent. I couldn't fix him.
You want to talk about freedom? When we had that moment and when I shared that, huge weight, huge burden lifted off. Number one, I'm talking about the abuse. I'd never talked to anybody, so talking to somebody about that was a huge burden lifted off. And it's so freeing. It is the most free feeling you'll ever feel. When you finally surrender your sin, when you finally surrender the addiction and all that hurt and everything comes with it, it's so freeing. And it's also very challenging because now at this point, you're making a decision to say, I don't want to live this way anymore. I want to be different. And it doesn't mean that, there's harsh words that are spoken. There's harsh, it's a long road. And so we had to decide, what does it mean to take this serious? I had to decide, what does it mean now for the first time in my life to be able to take this serious and address it? And so I had to go to counseling. I found a Christian counselor who helped me through talking about my childhood and the abuse that happened there. But there was a lot, we went together, and there was a lot of times I did not want to go in there because I just knew these were all my issues, and this was all my stuff I was bringing into the marriage. And so I didn't like it. I didn't want to go in there. But the counselor did a wonderful job of taking this seriously and saying, and kind of beating me down, but then building me up and revealing so much more than just pornography in my life that I was missing. So much more in my life was wrong because of pornography. And so, because I became a very selfish person, and I became consumed with who I was and what I could do, all about me. So it was very hard, and that road is still, it never ends. You always need to make those decisions. You always need to decide each day to surrender it to God. And so there were several things I did to help my freedom. I wrote down all the names I could remember of all the people that I had ever looked at. And I sat by a fire. This was at a town park, and I sat by the fire that I had built there. And I wrote the names down, and I burned the list. And I prayed over it and said, Lord, I don't want to remember these names ever again. I don't want to remember anything about this life ever again. I want to forget all about it. And God is amazing at when you come to him and you ask for help and you plead. He wants us to be healed. He wants you to be whole. And he's done that in my life. And through our marriage, it's been hard. It hasn't been perfect. There's been relapses. But God has worked through to build a foundation so that when those relapses have happened in our marriage, it hasn't been another moment of where you can't come up from the bottom again. And it's through accountability. It's through other men in my life in particular that I need to be honest with. It's through groups. It's through all that. And it's through being honest in your relationship about it. And I just want to say there's a thought out there that is very wrong, but we believed it. And it's, for Christian couples especially, it's, when you get married, then all your problems will be fixed because now, if you've been celibate, now you'll be able to have sex, so it'll be completely different. I actually had the conversation yesterday with a gentleman on the plane who's going to be getting married soon. And the reality is that's not the case because, as Kelly said, it's not, sex is different in pornography than it is in marriage. And sex and pornography is all about me. And when you're in marriage, that love is not supposed to be all about you. It's about another person. It's about your wife. It's about your husband. So God didn't create it to be, what can I get out of it? It's how can I show love to Kelly? How can I surrender and give her all of me, where two become one. So it's a notion that we have in our Christian homes that once you get married, then you won't look at pornography again because now you can make love to your wife, and that's just not the case.
Can a marriage survive? and it's a rhetorical question, but let's talk about what happens when a marriage survives and walks through a deep trial like this, because I think many people fear it because they believe it will break the marriage, and then they just don't talk about it, and it becomes worse and worse and worse, right? So obviously you got to a breaking point, but just talking to that a bit, both of you, Kelly and Brent together, can a marriage survive this? Is there encouragement for people to go tackle it? Don't avoid it.
I think I'm okay right now. I may soon though. Thank you. Marriage can survive a pornography addiction. We, going through it ourselves, was it the hardest time of our life? Yes. Was it the lowest point we've ever felt? Yes. But I will say, when there's honesty and there's accountability, there's counseling, and you're willing to put the work into it, marriage can survive pornography. And when you get to that other level, your marriage experiences a new depth of that you would never have had should you not have went through this trial. And I tell people, when you go through a really difficult point in your marriage and you work through it, you're stronger on the other side. You're stronger, ready to face that next battle. And that's what we did. Was it very, very hard? Yes. But when you get to the other side, the battles that come that are even bigger, you're ready and you're stronger for the next battle to fight.
When I think about marriage and I think about having those hard conversations and can it survive pornography addiction or any hard trial, really, to us the answer is, without a doubt, yes, it can. Not on our own power, not through our own hard work. There's many things that can contribute to it. And it is hard to talk about. And unfortunately, I didn't want to talk about it because I said, well, if I reveal this, then she's not going to want to stay married to me. She's not going to want to have a relationship with me. Well, the reality is the opposite is true. When you reveal that and say, this is who I am. I mean, I robbed Kellee of our first year of marriage because I was somebody who I was saying I was this person when I really wasn't. I was saying I had it together. I was lying and saying I didn't have a pornography addiction. Oh yeah, I looked at it when I was, a long time ago I looked at it, but I didn't like it, and so I don't look at it anymore. I mean, that was a bull-faced lie. And so that's not, a marriage won't survive if you're not honest about it. But being honest about it and saying, and we've had these I've had conversations with other husbands who've come to me and said, it's just, I'm scared what my wife is going to say when I say I'm addicted to pornography. I was away at a weekend over the summer, and many men came forward, and my dad was one of them, who said, I have a pornography problem. And when my dad came home to my mom and said, and finally told her after 40 years of marriage, I have this pornography problem. Yeah, it hurt my mom, absolutely. My mom was heartbroken. She was torn down. But to see now where they're at, to see them engaged in each other, to see them intentional about spending time with each other, holding hands, showing affection toward each other. I mean, their marriage, in my opinion, has never been stronger than when he's open and honest about it. And you can never get close, truly close as a husband and wife, unless you're honest about it. When you think you're close because you're hiding this, and I don't want to hurt my wife, so I'm not going to tell. I don't want to hurt my family. I don't want to risk it, so I'm not going to tell. You couldn't be further apart from each other. But when you surrender it and say, I want to be honest about this, and I'm willing to deal with it, that's when you come close together, and that's what God intended. God intended you to be real with each other, to be honest with each other, to be intermeshing in every area of life. And this has made Kellee was a strong woman before this, but this has made Kellee even stronger because she's walked through the fire, and I'm blessed because not all women want to take on that fight with their husbands, and some walk away, and it is unfortunate, and it's sad, but she's walked through that fire together. And when you walk through something like that, there's an unbelievable bond where there's just nothing will shake you because you've been through it. You've learned how to be honest. You've learned how to communicate better. There were so many things we needed to fix in our marriage. Even as a result of this, we learned how to communicate better. We learned how to fight fair, so to speak, or rules of engagement of how we are to talk to each other. And it created a whole different world for us that we never would have been able to do if we didn't decide that, yes, we are going to fight this. We're going to fight sin in our lives. It opened up Kellee to things in her own life and relationships that she's had in her life that she wanted to either focus on or that weren't positive relationships. And it showed us a lot of who takes this seriously. We met with pastors who said, oh, every guy does it, right? Every man does it. You're a guy. It's a guy thing. Well, I understand that that's what it's become. And I understand that, yes, I do believe every man struggles with this. That doesn't make it right. And that doesn't mean that I don't want to fight it. We're in this to fight taking the easy way out. We're in this to do what's right. And that's usually what's hard. It's harder to do what's right. It's not an easy journey. It's not a short journey. It's a lifelong commitment to it. And to know that there's evil in your life and not address it, it's wrong. And you're bound to then, I'm bound to pass that on to my children. I'm bound to not be able to be a leader in my home, in my church, in my community, with anything. If I'm holding on to pornography, I can't be used by God.
Kellee, rebuilding trust, and then on top of trust, intimacy again after that. What was that process?
Rebuilding trust takes time. It takes a lot of telling the truth 100 times before you can start to learn to trust again. And our counselor said for a really long time, don't trust him. He's burned bridges. He needs to earn it back. Trust has to be earned. So it took a lot of times telling the truth, being open with it, and it makes you very vulnerable to learn to trust somebody again. What was the second part of your question?
Intimacy.
Yes.
What is the healing to have an intimate relationship again?
Sure.
To trust, not just trust in heart, but with yourself.
Sure. Intimacy in a relationship too as well takes time when you're recovering from that. It's not easy. It's something that is a process to have deep conversation, to have love between your husband. It takes a really long time, but it's something that can be restored. It's something that, especially as women, we're very emotionally connected people. So if your husband's coming to you every single day and saying, I'm doing good with my pornography addiction, I'm doing good, I haven't looked at anything I shouldn't today, that is what builds trust. Or saying, I've even struggled today, that is what builds trust. So there can't be intimacy in a marriage without trust. And that takes time, but there can be intimacy again, for sure.
Has anything, you don't have personal experience with this, but women who fall into this trap of watching pornography, is there anything you want to say into that? Do you have an opinion on that or thought?
So women that watch pornography, I actually know of women who do and think it's not a big deal. I watch it with my husband, I watch it with my boyfriend, it's not a big deal. It creates unrealistic expectations for a woman. What is she supposed to be? What is she supposed to do? What is she supposed to look like? And that creates an unhealthy relationship, an unhealthy marriage. Women that are okay with watching that, I really think that they don't value themselves, they don't treasure themselves, and it really affects any relationship that they have as far as intimacy, and it leads to other things. I lost what I was going to say. Sorry, it's gone. It's gone.
Brent, when you were a kid, a teenager watching porn, culturally, were you discussing it with your friends, not just from I need help, or was it more in secret?
When I was a kid and when I would watch pornography, I did it a lot in secret. The friends that I had, and I grew up in a Christian home, so it was really, I didn't want to be open about it, and so I was very quiet about it. I was very, it was very in secret. I didn't talk about it with many of my friends. There was some conversations about pornography, but it was mainly in a joking attitude and things like that. But for me, it was all done in secret.
If you would be willing to share this, what was it about the other person that you fell in love with that made you want to fight through this? You don't want to go first.
You go first, I gotta think.
When we were going through this, there was just a lot of, and when I think about what made me want to fight through this, what made me want to put in the work to do this, there are a lot of things. And when I saw the hurt that was on my wife's face, and I saw all the lies that I believed about this from the very beginning all fall to the ground, and I'm standing on the ashes of this marriage that I've burned to the ground, basically. And we're a couple months into a marriage as newlyweds. That's supposed to be the best time, right? The first year of marriage is supposed to be the best time. You get to know each other. We didn't have kids yet, so you have more time on your hands. You have more energy. You have all this stuff you can do. we had good jobs. We were able to travel a little bit. And when I'm standing there, actually when I'm on my face on the ground, and I can see that this marriage is so empty and there's nothing in it. And I look over and I see that my wife of 2-3 months is just crumbled and hurting and broken. And when I look in the mirror and I say, Brent, this is a result of the decisions that you've made to put yourself before others, to not surrender, to not hate your sin. The real truth of the matter is, pornography, when you're in that addiction, like, you seek it out. You seek it out, and you're not running from it. It's not like, I know it's everywhere, and I know it can be hard to get away from it, but I wasn't trying that hard to get away from it. Every day I had that battle in my head, like I said, and every day I said, today's the last time. Today's the last time I look at pornography. I won't look at pornography again. And I would pray, and I would ask for forgiveness, and I would tell my accountability, like, yeah, but now I'm good. And the next day, here I am again, having the same conversation. That day when we talked, and it was when she looked at me and she said, Brent, I can't do this anymore. You have to decide what you're going to be. And if that's who you want to be, if you want to be a porn addict, if you want to be chasing that stuff, then I don't want to be here with you. And when I really let that sink in, and I look around and I say, no, this marriage is worth fighting for. The same spunkiness that attracted me to her, the same, my wife is a beautiful woman. She's a beautiful woman. There is no other woman that can compete with her. And I was sacrificing true love, true commitment, true intimacy, true wholeness for a cheap 2 minutes. And so what really caused me to decide that I need to fight this is, you feel so distant from God, you feel so distant from your wife. When that moment happens, I didn't know what was going to happen. I felt so distant, I felt so alone, I felt so inadequate, I felt so unprepared, I felt so weak, not to be able to, I don't know if I'll ever be able to do this. I don't know if I'll ever be able to. And when my wife looked at me and we made that commitment with tears in our eyes, with all the hurt, with all the pain, to say, when she said, Brent, I think you can do this. I think that I believe in you. You can do this. It's like God lit a fire in your heart to just take off and run with it. And it's not perfect, and it is ugly, and it's up and downs. So I don't want to give the impression that after that moment, everything was easy and nothing took hard work after that. The work was just beginning. But when I saw the hurt in my wife and thought, can I really inflict that kind of pain on somebody? They're not anything I did physically, right? I didn't do anything, but just breaking somebody's heart like that. It made me think, I want to help restore Kelly's heart. I want to help restore and give her a marriage that she can be proud of, that she can talk about, and not rob her like I did this whole first year of marriage.
Pause for me, Kelly. Tammy? Hey, Tammy? Can you just grab just some of those Kleenex up there? Just hand it to Brent and just. Actually getting better. And then his nose, temples. Thanks, Sam.
You got that fire lit up when you were talking about
Okay.
that.
I know.
All right, Kelly.
Yeah.
Just a second. Okay.
What caused me to stay really didn't have anything to do with Brent, but it had everything to do with Jesus. If I'm being truly honest, when we were going through this, I didn't know Brent. When I found out that he had a history of abuse and a history of pornography addiction, those are things that I didn't know marrying him, and I didn't know who he was. I had been deceived. I felt tricked. I felt like I didn't marry who I thought I married. So it wasn't Brent that made me stay. It was Jesus and the commitment that I had made. with the Lord, of that I was going to fight for my marriage and I wasn't going to give up and I was going to cling to Jesus through it. And once he really started to get his life in order and started really working through this addiction and working seriously, is when I started to find that love again, to kind of see who he really was, because I didn't know who he was. Everything that he had told me I had questioned. So when I saw that he was taking this seriously and he wanted to restore our marriage and he was going to fight along with me, then I knew who he was again. And so seeing him fight, seeing him be honest, seeing him hold true to not going on the internet unless I'm home, or taking those boundaries that we put in place seriously, that's when I fell in love with Brent again.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Pam. That's the only one I have.
Anything that's on your heart, Kellee or Brent, just free to share. Anything you want to share about the journey? We're going to film some other things with other pointed questions, but anything in this setting?
I think wives that are going through this, if your husband comes to you and tells you he's struggling, one, be grateful that he told you, because honesty is everything. If he's coming to you and telling you, I'm struggling with something, you stick by him. You work with him, because at that point where he's sharing that, he's at the lowest of low, and it's not our responsibility to stomp on him when he's down. And I've learned too that as Christians we kind of compare sins, so pornography is worse than struggling with doubting ourselves or questioning ourselves. And really in God's eyes it's the same. So what we struggle with as wives is going to be different than what our husbands struggle with. So if he's coming to you admitting his flaws and his sins, embrace that. It's not, you can be angry, but don't be angry towards him. Work together with him. Fight it. Don't quit, because there is hope and there is restoration that can come out of it.
When I talk to men today and they admit to me, or they admit to somebody in our circle of or influence that they're struggling with pornography, this has to be taken serious. It was something that I was relieved when we'd go to people and they'd say, oh, every man struggles with it. It was like, okay, well then I guess I'm okay then to keep struggling with it, and I'll just continue to fight like this, which isn't really fighting at all. And so the message from our testimony, from what we've gone through, is to take it very seriously. This will destroy you. This will lead to infidelity without a doubt. And in all reality, every time I would look at pornography, I was cheating on my wife. I was sinning in my heart. I was creating lustful situations. And so I was unfaithful to my wife when I would look at pornography. It's not different if I were to go out and to have a physical affair with a woman. It was creating the same hurt, the same pain. And in God's eyes, it was the same thing. And in my eyes, it's become the same thing too. And so the message to take this very seriously, because if you let this rot, this will lead to one place, and that is complete destruction of you, your family, your relationship with God, your relationship with anybody. Forget about relationship with your kids and things like that. And so I'll share real quick, I went to SLAA, which stands for Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous, and I went to that for 3 years. And I went in with a kind of a poor attitude of, well, I'm not as bad as these guys. I look at pornography, and this guy is here because a court ordered him to be here because he touched kids. And when I heard their stories and I shared my story, I quickly realized that I was on the same trajectory as these guys. I was just not as old as them. And I realized when this man, he said, I never thought I'd touch my kids. I never thought I would touch anybody. But the common thread we all had was we looked at pornography. And when you look at pornography, that opens your mind up to anything. And for this particular gentleman, it went down that road to then one day he's touching his kids and he's wondering, how did I get here? How did I get to the point where I'm touching my own kids? And the reality is because he opened that door of pornography, and you're on that train track, if you will, And as that train goes, you get closer and closer, and you better get off as soon as possible, because that train leads to sex trafficking. It leads to molestation, rape. We live in a society where rape happens in broad daylight, and we don't do anything. Where are people? Why aren't people outraged by that? How can someone feel so emboldened to go and rape somebody in broad daylight? The answer to me is pornography, 100%. Pornography leads people to believe that this is just how it is. And just like it gives women the wrong idea of what sex is, it gives men the wrong idea. I was going into marriage thinking, okay, this is how it happens. I don't really have to do anything to be intimate with my wife. We just do this. And that was so far from the truth, and it creates a lot of hurt. So message is to take it very serious, because it will destroy you. And it, if not for the grace of God, if not for God intervening in our marriage, it would have destroyed our marriage. And I'm really glad it didn't, and I'm really glad that God has given us both the grace and mercy and restored our marriage to what we would have never been able to do on our own. We were talking about this morning. When we think back when we first met to then our first year of marriage and how hard that was, if we would have looked around and said, someday you'll be able to talk to people about pornography, not on our own power, not through our own strength, but with God, all things are possible, and He can restore